So the final event that happens, and I think it's interesting to note that as reluctant as Catherine is to go on this first carriage ride, right? She finds out that in her absence, the Tilneys have they were that Mrs. Allen saw the Tilneys, and she's so disappointed that she wasn't able to reconnect with them. But lo and behold, and this is the last kind of big takeaway, or not big takeaway, but big event of the evening, or not the evening, but of the chapter, is we go to another dance, and Henry and Catherine dance together again. And this dance is really, really important because it kind of establishes uh, this kind of understanding, or not necessarily this understanding between Catherine and Henry, but it gives us a different side of Henry that we have not seen before. And it also, and if of all of the big kind of moments of this novel, this scene is one that is much talked about in Jane Austen scholarship, because in the second dance with Catherine, Henry Tilney compares dancing to marriage, and he does this because he sees kind of John Thorpe making a play at Dancing with Catherine when Catherine has already promised to dance with him. And it shows a more serious side to Henry in that he is marriage minded. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I love Henry Tilney so much, is because he's kind of subtly talking about or introducing this idea of marriage to Catherine in a way that she doesn't pick up on, which, I mean, she takes him very literally. He says, that gentleman, John Thorpe, would have put me out of my patience had he stayed with you a half a minute longer. He has no business to withdraw the attention of my partner from me. We have entered into a contract of mutual agreeableness for the space of an evening, and all our agreeableness belongs solely to each other for that time. Nobody can fasten themselves on the notice of one without injuring the rights of the other. I consider a country dance as an emblem of marriage. Fidelity and complacence, are the principal duties of both, and those men who do not choose to dance or marry themselves have no business with the partners or wives of their neighbors. And Catherine says, but they are such very different things that you think they cannot be compared together. And she says, to be sure not. People that marry can never part, but must go and keep house together. People that dance only stand opposite each other in a long room for half an hour. And here's where Catherine's inexperience and naivety is showing. She can't, he's, she misses what he's saying. And what he's saying is that he's marriage minded. He knows what makes a good marriage. And he goes on to continue. And I say this educating her in some sort of way. And I don't mean that in a condescending kind of way, but he's talking like he goes out of his way to really elaborate on this marriage. He says, as such is your definition of matrimony in dancing. Taken in that light, certainly their resemblance is not striking, but I think I could place them in such a view. You will allow that in both, man has the advantage of choice, women only the power of refusal. That in both it is an engagement between man and woman formed for the advantage of each, and that when once entered into, they belong exclusively to each other till the moment of its dissolution. That it is their duty each to endeavor to give the other no cause for wishing that he or she had bestowed themselves elsewhere, and their best interests to keep their own imagination from wandering towards the perfections of their neighbors, or fancying that they should have been better off with anyone else. You will allow this. And he goes on to kind of elaborate on this, but I say that he's educating her in showing her that the importance of social customs, of conventions, and of marriage, and that he, unlike his competition, right, he recognizes that he has competition with John Thorpe potentially, that he, unlike John Thorpe, is the better of the two. And I'm interested and curious to see what you guys think of this comparison and this metaphor that Henry Tilney provides in this kind of engagement or interaction between them, because it says, it's saying so much that Catherine doesn't get quite yet, right? So at the end of this kind of dance, which she is enjoying, Catherine is so much kind of enthralled with Henry Tilney. They make a plan to go for a walk, Eleanor, Henry, and Catherine, the next day. And the only kind of caveat is, well, if it doesn't rain, we'll go on this walk. So Catherine has in turn kind of entered into this social engagement, this contract that it would be remiss of her and rude of her to break. So keep that in mind as you guys continue reading. Some kind of key takeaways that I think are important for us to look at are these kind of the importance of the rules of etiquette and the dangers of breaking them. And the way Austen has this way of critiquing characters through her satire, and it's very subtle, but it's so wonderfully and brilliantly done. We can't necessarily take everything that Austen says about her characters too seriously. These ideas of presumptions and their dangers, because we have with, especially with John Thorpe, that presumption of Catherine's wealth, or that she is this heir to old Mr. Allen, and the dangers that it could lead to, not only for him, but for her, as well as Catherine's inability to read her own situation and the people around her, her gullibility, her naivety, and her reliance on others to kind of guide her when she's got that kind of gut feeling that she's not wrong, right? This kind of idea of manipulation, both in terms of Catherine's ability to be manipulated and manipulating situations to work out in their advantage, as well as James and Isabella's budding relationship. And the final thing that I think is worth noting is this idea of reading practices. And that's in chapter 5. And I deliberately saved that until the end, because Catherine is very adept at reading novels. She reads them all the time, but she is not adept at reading people, situational awareness, right? And at the end of chapter 5, we get what is as popular as Henry Tilney's metaphor for marriage and dance. The most popular thing in Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey is this section in chapter 5 where it is labeled her defense of the novel. And arguably the entire Northanger Abbey in and of itself as a whole is a defense of the novel, but she particularly breaks that kind of narrative and inserts her own views at the end of chapter 5. And if I remind you, if you will, to reconsider what we read in Johnson's Rambler number 4 and what Johnson said about novels and their value and novels and their readers. And essentially the argument that Jane Austen is making is that contemporary novels are full of wit and humor, and they reveal this deeper knowledge of human nature and are far superior to the outdated ideas and unnatural characters found in collections of older works, such as The Spectator magazine, which we read in the defense of the wit and what makes somebody witty with Richard Steele and The Spectator. But you could easily insert such older works as the Rambler magazine. And I think it's really important because she's talking about novels, and she says, "I'm no novel reader," and that's what someone might say. I seldom look into novels, that people are ashamed to read novels, right? I do not imagine I often read novels. Someone like John Thorpe, such as the common cant. People often say this. "And what are you reading, miss?" "Oh, it's only a novel," replies the young lady, while she lays down her book with affected indifference or commentary shame. "It's only Cecilia, Camilla, or Belinda, or in short, some work in which the greatest powers of the mind are displayed, in which the most thorough knowledge of human nature, the happiest delineation of its varieties, the liveliest effusions of wit and humor are conveyed to the world in the best chosen language." So, in short, in this one little sentence, she says so much about the value of novels, but not only, and I think it's interesting to note, like, she's not only defending novels, but she's defending her art form, her craft, and her value as an author and creator. So I'm interested to see what you guys think of her defense of the novel, and the novel reader that is Catherine. So this is just kind of the first 10 chapters. I hope you guys will keep reading. I know that some of you are probably going to have or say that you're having a difficult time getting into this novel, but it's really so good in the way that Austen really kind of parodies and satirizes and pokes fun of everyone, and the things that she's saying about 18th century society as a whole. So I'm interested to see what you guys think, and I'm excited to continue reading the novel with you next week.